Hello, Cousin Johnny here. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the Buzzin' with Cousins show. We thank you. Thank you, that garlic stuff. If you like garlic, you're going to love it. Put it on just about anything. That garlic stuff. Tuesday, Alvarado Farmers Market, or go to thatgarlicstuff.com. Thank you. Thank you, I Heart You Candles. Beautiful hand poured candles. These make special gifts. They're fantastic. Call Sherry at 574-9446 or go down and say hello right there on that walkway right in front of Fisherman's Wharf. Thank you, Sherry. I Heart You Candles. Thank you. Fremont Street. Grab and go healthy meals. They're delish. On your way from home from work, go grab some, heat them up, and fantastic. Thank you, Suds Cyber Laundry, 709 Lighthouse, Pacific Grove. Great modern machines, big screen TV, coffee, and a great friendly staff. Thank you, Suds. Thank you, the Whiskey Club, 425 Alvarado Street. Over 600 whiskeys to choose from. Go on in, relax, enjoy a nice whiskey. They also have a bottle shop. It's great. Great place to relax and enjoy. Tell them a cousin sent you. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, storyteller, author, and all-around good guy, Tony Albano. Tony has written 3 books, the latest being Cherish, about a New York teenager and a nun find love. Thank you, Tony. And if you want to order the book or find out more about Tony, go to Tony, Tony, Albano, Albano, storyteller.com. Check it out. Thank you. Thank you, sponsors, for the Buzzin' with Cousins show. We thank you. Hello, how's everybody doing out there? Welcome to Buzzin' with Cousins show. We got a great show today. I have a great guest, and I'm honored to have this guest on. If you don't know him, you probably do know him. He's a historian, Tim Thomas, and we thank him for what he does here in the community. So today we're going to talk about a local hard hat abalone diver by the name of Roy Hattori, and he discovered the white abalone. So please welcome Tim Thomas. Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing good, cousin. How about you?
I'm great. Thank you for coming on, Buzzing with Cousin, and giving us this fascinating story.
Always
so, who was Ray Hattori? Where did he come from? And what? Give me the scoop.
So Roy was a local boy born in Monterey in 1919, and went to Monterey schools. And when he had just graduated from Monterey High School, his father wanted to get into the abalone business because during the Depression, and he had a lot of debts to pay, and he thought this would be a good way to make some money. And so he borrowed some equipment and took Roy in a little boat in the middle of my harbor and dressed him up in all that dive gear and just bolted on the helmet and attached a 65 pounds of lead weight to his front and back and tied lead to his shoes and just tossed him off the side of the boat. Said, "You start running down there." And that's how he learned to be a diver. Luckily, the older divers who took him under their wing kind of showed him what to do. So what's really important about Roy in this story here is that Roy was the only Nisei diver born here in California. All the other divers, Japanese divers, came from Japan. They're working on contract and for the most part returned to Japan. But Roy was born here, only one.
Great. And so he fished or he dove for the abalone, which is the rabbit abalone here. And
most of the abalone and Monterey has a long history of abalone. Monterey was literally the abalone capital of the world.
Right.
And I've been doing this kind of work for 40 years now. And it is my opinion that the abalone fishery in California is the most important fishery in history in California. It may not be economically, but it definitely is historically and culturally, and it's all centered in Monterey, all of it.
Yeah.
Very, very big.
Now you were telling me that was it the Japanese that came here? Just they noticed that there was a lot of. You told me it was a carpet of abalone on the bottom of the bay.
Right. And that was discovered early, and it determined in the late 1890s, around 1896. And there was a guy named Otto Sabaru Noda who came to Monterey, who was hired to work as a labor contractor for the Pacific Improvement Company, who owned about 8,000 acres of the Monterey Peninsula at that time. And he was bringing in Japanese laborers to clear land and that kind of thing. And then he was providing for these workers foods and fresh water and wood for fires for their camps. And it was he was collecting firewood near the Monterey Wharf, near the Monterey Harbor, that he noticed this huge abundance of abalone. I mean, literally, he actually described it in a letter as being a carpet of abalone.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. And then there was a gentleman that had pretty much put it on the map by having a restaurant here in Monterey.
Right. So the Japanese were drying abalone. That was where the market was. It was in Japan, in other Asia, and there was no Western market for it really. No, although they attempted, there's different restaurants and chefs would try different things. They would, because the thing about abalone, it's just a big marine snail, but it's very tough. And so you have to prepare it a certain way. And people would pour lies and things on it. And it was Popperness Dalter, the German restaurateur, who came to Monterey in 1907 and opened a small restaurant on Alvarado Street. And noticed the huge abundance, noticed the abalone, brought into his restaurant, experimented with it, and finally came up with that famous recipe where you slice the foot, because really that's what you're eating. When you eat the abalone, here, at least here, is the foot of it. And then he pounded it, and you don't just pound it. There's a certain technique to doing that, and then that loosens up the connective tissues. And then he run through egg wash and cracker crumbs and cook it up quickly in olive oil and butter. He treated it like a Wiener Schnitzel.
Yeah, right. Kind of like a Sicilian. They make the breaded steak.
Exactly.
And sometimes the breaded calamari too.
Exactly. That's who the poor man's abalone steak is, the calamari. I've seen it, had it that way. Yeah.
When abalone became so expensive, as a delicacy, a lot of the Sicilians were starting to fillet it, pound it, bread it, and that's how John Favalora had the restaurant Abalonetti.
That's correct.
And he named he named that plate Abalonetti because he says it's kind of similar to abalone.
Right. Yeah. You could have got an abalone steak dinner on the Monterey Wharf in the 1980s for about $10. That dinner was actually over $100.
How's the fishery doing now, Tim?
There is no fishery anymore. There's no commercial abalone fishery in California. There's not even a sport fishery for it anymore. Hasn't been since the 1990s. But there are abalone farms. There's one here in Monterey Abalone Farm on Wharf Number 2, where they raise abalone in big baskets underneath the wharf. Yeah.
Okay, so Roy ends up as
Roy becomes a young man. He was 18 when he first started, and he was very good at what he did. And it was common for these divers to just, because they would go, the abalone season could last a long time, sometimes 9 months, right? And they weren't always just stay in Monterey. They went south. They go as far down as Santa Barbara, Point Conception area to dive abalone. And they'd be down there for a couple of weeks at a time. And in September of 1939, Roy was down with his boat and the crew off Point Conception and he was diving about 60 feet of water when he came across some unusual looking abalones, and he knew they were something different. And perhaps he thought even a new species. So he collected it and brought it up to the surface. And then they spent a couple of weeks down there, and he collected a few more of them. And when he got back to Monterey, he brought it to a friend of his, a guy named Andrew Sorensen. Andrew Sorensen actually was an insurance salesman, but he was this big collector of marine shells. And in fact, Roy had collected other shells for him. And he was kind of an expert in all this, but he didn't know what it was. He didn't recognize it. And so they took it to Hopkins Marine Station together. And there they showed it to some of the biologists, scientists at Hopkins, of course, part of Stanford University. And they didn't know what it was either. So Sorensen sent it to his friend, a good friend of his, a guy named Dr. Paul Bardish at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Dr. Bardish was the director of the Natural History Museum there at that time and was the noted expert in the world of marine shells and marine species, and of mollusks in particular. And so it was indeed a new species. He called it the white abalone. It's called the white abalone because the mantle of the fish, or the animal itself, is sort of this whitish color. That's what Roy knows. Whereas the red abalone is sort of a dark color, and this was a whitish color. And so in typical, it is today that when any newly discovered species should be named after the person that discovered it. Well, Bardish actually did turn named it after his friend Andrew Sorensen, Aliotis sorensenii, and not Hattori as it should be. And that always sort of Roy was the nicest guy in the world. I knew Roy since the early 1990s, and that was the one thing that always bothered him, that they didn't name the white abalone after him. And other folks noticed that about, who interviewed Roy over the years. He always brought that up, and they always talked about it. But what can you do about it? And they're always looking for evidence to prove that he was the actual discoverer of the abalone, of the white abalone, and nothing could be found. And then about a year and a half ago or so, I had this idea that because I'd worked some with the Smithsonian a little bit on other, I've been there, gone through some of their archives, and I had this idea that they probably kept that correspondence between Sorensen and Bardish, and so I wrote an email to curator at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. It took about 6 months. But they all finally arrived in my inbox, all the letters that went back and forth between them. And there it was, handwritten in black and white from Andrew Sorensen in 1940, saying, no, it was Roy Hattori who brought the large white abalones. And so Sorensen knew that it was discovered by Roy and thought it should be named after Roy. So a lot we can do about it at this point. They do change things, but it's a very complicated process to have the names change. In fact, it probably will happen, but we're working on it, kind of.
I hope that happens, that he gets the deserved.
What's good is the white abalone actually, once Roy found it, others began to find it, and it became very popular. In fact, it was considered to be a really delicacy, more so than the red abalone. So it became very popular abalone to eat. And because of that, it was fished almost to extinction. And the white abalone is actually the first, I think the only mollusk ever put on the endangered species list. And it is currently, there's a big project being run by UC California. I believe UC California Davis is really the one spearheading this, where they are raising white abalones in the small little abalone laboratories, abalone farms, to release back into the wild. And there's been a number of institutions working on this project. There's a couple of museums working on this project, in particular the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, who I worked with them a little bit on this. And what's good about this is that all these organizations now recognize the fact that Roy was really the true discoverer, and they can include that in all their literature about the white abalone now, and it's included in the exhibits in Santa Barbara and other places. So that's the good part. And what's even better is that Roy's grandson, Tommy Hattori, who is a young man, but he is a teacher in Southern California and has been behind a lot of this, and he's beginning to pick up that mantle, no pun intended, and is working on it as well, which I really like to see.
Yeah, I remember you did at the Japanese club. You did a show on the similar to what we're talking about today. That was really a great event, and thank you for the events that you do there.
And we just opened a small exhibit about Roy and the white abalone, but also about Roy's post-abalone diving days. And so Roy continued to be a diver even after all those abalone days. During World War II, he was recruited in the Army as part of what they call MIS, Military Intelligence Service, where he was sent to Japan after they dropped the bomb in Hiroshima. In fact, Roy was in Hiroshima a week after they dropped that bomb. And he spent about a year in Japan. And when he came back to California, came back to Monterey, of course, he was married, had some children, and became a watchmaker, actually. But he continued to dive, to free dive. And he, in 1950, along with a couple of friends, created one of the very, very first scuba diving clubs in California called the Sea Otters, Monterey Peninsula Sea Otters.
Okay.
And they would continue to dive and collect abalone and things and other things just for pleasure. And we actually have in our exhibit a big, beautiful patch that they wore that has a sea otter dressed in a wetsuit, which is the coolest thing ever. And it's a fun thing.
Now, Tim, that exhibit is at the Japanese American.
That's right. It's in our little museum, and we don't have any set hours for that museum. We open up always on the first set every month. It's always open. It's also open for any other special events. And I open it up if someone just calls me or emails me and asks me. I'm usually at the hall. I'm usually here every day, and I'm happy to show it to anybody. So we always want to show the museum.
Now, is the Roy's exhibit, the one that you put together, is that a temporary exhibit or it's always going to be there?
It's a permanent exhibit now.
Oh, man, that's really great. And so I've been to that museum.
All right.
So listeners out there, it's really great. And there was a big Japanese influence in this Monterey community. So
yeah, people don't realize that. I mean, really, because of abalone. Abalone literally built the Monterey Wharf, right? It was abalone. I mean, by 1920, there were 9 full-time Japanese abalone companies operating off the Monterey Wharf. And 1929, the California abalone industry was bringing in close to $1 million in revenue. $1929, 75% of that was coming out of Monterey Bay by Japanese divers. And so prior to World War II, the majority of the businesses on that Monterey Wharf were Japanese-owned fish markets and abalone processing. Yeah, people don't know that, and they play their big, huge role. It's sort of, as I mentioned, my work in the last 40 years is on the history of the fisheries of Monterey, and really the last almost 20 years now is focused on the Japanese story and then the abalone story in particular, which I, again, think is so incredibly important.
I've got got a photo of an abalone. I don't know how good it is, but let's show it. A white abalone.
There you go. Beautiful. So you can see all the white, how it is, why it's called the white abalone, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Very nice.
I got a photo of Roy right there.
There he is. Roy is a young man. He was about 18 when that picture was taken.
That's the man there. He's got the outfit on, the hard hat. That was a dangerous profession.
It was a dangerous profession. You're right, but the Japanese actually were very safety conscious and took care of their divers. Although there were some accidents, but they were, for the most part, they were pretty good about it. And in terms of safety, there were very few deaths involved in that.
Okay, there's your exhibit.
Well, that's one of them. That's the older exhibit. And you can see Roy in the photograph there. and dive boat and all the stuff. And then the photograph in the middle there is one of the only known photographs of a working abalone boat in Monterey. They actually was taken off of Point Sur. If you walk, if anybody taken the tour of the Point Sur light station, if you walk up that road to the light station, that's where that tour was taken. It was off that road. I'm actually a docent at Point Sur, and it took me actually a couple of years to figure out exactly where the photographer, a guy named J.B. Phillips was the photographer, where he was standing to take that picture. But I figured it out.
Yeah. So that's really great, Tim. And now, Tim, I want to give you a plug here. Are you still doing your wharf tours?
Yes, I do. And by the way, these tours are all free. Right?
Okay.
But I give these tours on the first Saturday of every month. It starts at 10 o'clock. They go for about 2 hours. And they're really a tour. It's a cultural history, really, of Monterey. But we use the neighborhood of the Monterey Wharf. So it starts at the wharf and we go around the whole neighborhood there. It isn't walk that far. It's a couple hours to do. And it's a fun tour. And as I mentioned, it's free. But you have to let me know that you're planning to attend. So just email me or call me, and we'll get you on the list.
Tim, what's your email?
My email is very easy. It's timsardine@yahoo.com.
timsardine@yahoo.com. Email Tim. I mean, myself and a few other people, we had a group of probably 7 or 8. And we took advantage of Tim's tour, and it was fantastic. If you're interested at all of Monterey history, which I am, because I grew up here, and my dad was a sardine fisherman, and I can't get enough. In fact, I drive Tim crazy because every time I run into him, I ask him a question about, hey, who was the skipper of the, the New Meredithma or one of these first namers or whatever, and I'll ask him question and he answers them for me. So Tim, awesome. Thank you so much for what you do in the community, preserving this history of this beautiful paradise that we live in. So I want to thank you, Tim, for coming on, and thank you for coming on today and opening up our minds and talking about our Monterey hero there, Roy Hattori.
Yeah, my hero.
Hopefully they'll change that name and give him his due. For the
it may be a long time if they do, but we're gonna stay at it.
Okay, so Tim, anytime there's any you got any events coming up or whenever, feel free to come on my page and let's let the people know what.
I will for sure, Johnny. Thank you very much.
Okay, Tim, have a great day. Thank you so much. Johnny and Tim Thomas out. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.